by talking to the committees. We had somebody from the Office of the Pro Vice Chancellor Learning and Teaching attend each one of the committees where an education-focused candidate was being assessed. And also we spoke to some candidates who gave us feedback. And we've consolidated all that information and made what mercifully are some very minor changes that will hopefully make the process even better for this year. So Caroline, if we could go to the first slide. So like all candidates for promotion, the criteria relate to being a sustained high performer at the current level and demonstrating the capacity to meet the minimum level of academic performance for the level to which promotion is sought. It's a purely merit-based process, promotion, and that's the same for any candidate that seeks promotion at Monash. So we won't dwell on that, we'll move on to weightings. So obviously by definition, education-focused candidates are expected to place a greater emphasis on teaching and learning, and less focus on research, although I'll comment on that a bit later on. The academic promotion procedure therefore requires that an education-focused candidate allocate weightings of up to 85% for education, a minimum of 5% for research, and a set weighting of 10% for service. Just a couple of points on the research aspect of things. Research should be pedagogical in nature. We've got where possible there in brackets because obviously we realise that education-focused roles have only been here at Monash since 2010, so there may not have been the capacity yet to build up a solid sort of track record in pedagogical research. In which case we say to people, refer to your disciplinary research, comment on that as evidence of your research achievements to date, but then comment on how that research has informed your teaching and learning and how your trajectory or career trajectory will be heading towards pedagogical research in the future. As people progress through the levels, it is expected that an education-focused candidate would do more and more research, more and more pedagogical research. And if we can just go to the next slide, you'll see why that makes sense. So as we look at sort of level A and B academics, education-focused academics would be making a good contribution to learning and teaching with possibly minimal amounts of research. But then as we move up the levels, and at level C you'll be expected to show educational leadership at a school, faculty or university level, and then at D, national reputation and educational leadership, and then an international reputation at level E. It sort of follows that as you're developing that reputation, you'll be publishing research that supports that and looking and developing best practice principles in that area. So that's why the percentages that we recommend that you allocate increase. They're indicative percentages either. It will vary from case to case. You assemble your case for promotion, how you best want to put it forward. But that's sort of indicative to show that you have minimal levels of research at the start of your career, and then as you progress, more and more research. Do you have any particular questions about that? Before we move on? Yes?
When you say up to, is that the maximum? That's only 5%?
No, they're really indicative.
Yeah.
But what that's trying to show is that you would always be expected to have a greater focus on education than research.
So maybe I can come to that too. I think it depends because there's different workload models out there, in different faculties, and there's no single one for all of Monash. But if it were a percentage, that's what it would be. But people do it on different things like hours and outcomes, and you know what I mean. It's not like a single set, and some are clinical. You know what I mean. So that's why it says that. But if it were a percentage, that would be the limit.
So moving to the next.
There's a question.
Oh, yes, sorry, Jen.
Are staff members eligible to apply for promotion during the probation period?
Yes. Just a quick note on referees. Anybody seeking promotion to level C and above are required to provide referees. The numbers that you're required to provide differ. Won't go into that in any great detail, but just wanted to bring a couple of things to your attention. It's important to choose your referees carefully, and keep in mind that the committee is going to be most interested in your achievements in education. So it's probably best to choose people who are familiar with your educational achievements and have the capacity to make an objective evaluation of your work in that regard. Because your referees will ultimately be asked to comment on your contribution in learning and teaching and quantitative scholarship of learning and teaching, and also your impact in that environment. So I would recommend consulting with your performance supervisor, head of unit, your associate dean education will be able to give you a pretty good indication of good referees. But it is worth keeping that in mind, that they will need that particular focus for your referees. Now the academic performance standards, I'm sure you're all familiar with by now, both qualitative and quantitative standards across the three key areas of academic activity, being research, education and service. As an education-focused candidate, you do not need to address the quantitative research performance standards. So just to avoid any doubt, they are research metrics that you have within your faculty and sometimes right down to discipline level, things like number of publications, grant income and the like. You don't have to address those in your case for promotion. But you do, if you're talking about your research, have to have met the qualitative research standards. So any research you have will have needed to have met those standards. So just focusing on the education performance standards, because this will be the focus of your application. The quantitative education performance standard here at Monash is just question 5 on the section, which is the overall satisfaction question. The minimum being 3.6 and the aspirational standard being 4.7. So you would need to show there are any number of different tables that you can complete in your application form that would be able to demonstrate how you're performing against those standards. Now the qualitative education performance standards are, they basically cover 5 broad themes. We have a set of guidelines specifically for education-focused candidates that go into this in quite a lot of detail. It looks at each of the 5 themes and how you might go about addressing those themes in your application. So just so you know what those themes are, if you aren't familiar with them, the first one is approaches to learning and teaching that influence, motivate and inspire students to learn. So you would be commenting against that. Development of curricula, resources or services that reflect a command of the field. So this would require you to outline your contribution to reviewing, writing or redesigning a new unit, for example, or other resources. The third is approaches to assessment, feedback and learning support that foster independent learning. So here you would look at how you might have assisted students to become responsible for managing their own learning, by way of example. Fourth is respect and support for the development of students as individuals, and this is where you get to focus in on how you might deal with students who might have special needs or different cultural backgrounds and how you might have encouraged them. And finally, scholarly activities that have influenced and enhanced learning and teaching, and that's pretty broad, and would include anything from curriculum development to contributions to textbooks and the like. So we'll move on to the changes to the promotion process. As Adam alluded to earlier, we had a pretty good success rate last year. There were 12 applicants for promotion. 9 were successful and 1 was conditionally promoted. So that's fairly encouraging, I think. As I said, we had people, not only HR staff, but somebody from the Office of the Pro-Vice Chancellor in there at each meeting just to make sure that everything was happening. But we have reflected on things that could be better, and I'll just go through what's changed. So last year, the committees had the option of co-opting additional members to the committees to talk to education-focused candidates. And also the Associate Dean Education was invited to each committee meeting to talk to their report. This year, we've retained the possibility that the committees can co-opt additional members. But we got feedback from the committees that they didn't find that the Associate Dean Education attending added much value beyond the report that the Associate Dean Education already provides. So instead they said they would really benefit from having Adam or a Sue Willis or somebody who really knows about education-focused candidates being there at the meeting to help them with those deliberations. So that's the change that was approved by Academic Board earlier this year. And so this year it will either be Adam or Sue or somebody that they nominate as an education expert who will be attending the committees as full voting members. And that's the only change that we have made to the process this year. So finally, there are a lot of resources resources out there that will be able to help you with the process if you are contemplating it for this year or future years. There's a range of resources on our academic promotion website. Like I said, we have a specific set of guidelines both for candidates and also for committees to help them with deliberations. I encourage you to have a look at the Academic Performance Standards website and familiarise yourself with that. As I mentioned, in those guidelines, we go into great detail of how you could address each of the qualitative education performance standards. And finally, the Monash Quality Unit will have information around situ and form the forms of unit evaluation. And if you have any questions, each faculty has a promotion coordinator, and that's the person that you can go to in the first instance for any questions really around the process. If you have questions about the academic content of your application, I'd encourage you to talk to your colleagues or to Associate Deans or Performance Supervisor. But any questions about the process, your faculty promotion coordinator would be happy to help you out. That is normally your HR business partner, but there is a list of the names available to you. And that's all I'm going to say today, and just take any questions. No?
Sorry, can you mention a little bit about the promotion process from level A to B? Would that be the same as
It's a much simpler process from A to B. There isn't a committee that assesses the application. Basically, the dean makes that decision. You still complete an application form, you still make your case for promotion, but the dean approves it. It doesn't go to a committee for deliberation. And you can do that at any time during the year. Whereas at C to D, C, D and E, there's a set dates where you'd have to submit an application.
And is that also like, if you fail, you have to wait 2 years or?
No.
There's no rule about how long you have to wait. The committee might make recommendations about what you might want to
If
achieve.
you applied to something and you weren't successful, you can do it for another couple of years.
There's no rule.
That used to be the
That
case,
used
I
to be,
think.
yeah.
But it's not
It's
anymore.
changed.
Yeah, we got rid of that. So,
Yeah.
I mean, because it's a kind of, imagine someone just missed. You know, like it just seems a bit odd. So I think these things, if you've got a true meritocracy, like a merit-based system, it's got to be a merit-based system, not a time-based system. It's
Well,
not,
that's what I.
not time served, it's
Yeah, yeah.
achievements made. Yeah, that's what we take the view on.
I have a question around SETU evaluations. It's not a question just for education-focused people, but for everybody who applies for promotion. As you know, now we have the SETU evaluation where you evaluate, students evaluate the unit, but they also evaluate the person who teaches. And that's personal and it's accessible only by the individual. But then when you look at the data, you don't have a point of reference to see how you sit relative to your colleagues, whether you do better or worse than your colleagues. I think it would be very useful to have the aggregate data in the promotions website so that you could see whether you got a 4.3 in one of those 4 items, where does that place you in terms of percentile with respect to your colleagues, which is what we used to have with MonQuest, but we don't have it with this new system anymore. I think it would be very, very valuable for everybody, not just for education-focused role.
We can feed that back to the quality unit and see how they feel about it. There is a lot of concern about the about privacy and people.
Well, but
releasing
MonQuest was
information.
private too.
Sure.
But perhaps if they're median information.
Yes, it's aggregate data.
I would really support that because
Yeah,
I've just
yeah,
been supporting
yeah.
people who are going for a national citation recently, and they can't include 2011 data, and they have to say why, and it actually puts them at a disadvantage with the rest of the country.
I think that's a good point. Yeah. I don't think there's a technical reason why it can't be done. I just think it's a policy that we need to
Yeah.
So
discuss.
it's not in the policy,
Yeah.
it wasn't done, I think,
Yeah.
that's all.
As last year was the first year that academics could apply for an education-focused promotion, is there a possibility that there was a large backlog, so the numbers are allowed to be smaller for a few years, or success rate would be less?
Look, possibly we'll have to see what happens this year. But there certainly were a couple of candidates who anecdotally reported to me that they'd had trouble getting promoted in the past, and this gave them more confidence to focus in on what they're good at and to present a really good case for promotion. But we'll have to see what happens this year.
Can I comment? Likewise, it's also a matter of educating the promotion committees. This was the first time around, and I felt that particularly strongly in my own faculty science, where they were not used to evaluate these kinds of nominations or applications for promotion. So with time, I think that they will get used to understand quality in this domain. So it's only going to be for the data for the candidates, I think. And also another thing that's probably for Adam is, you know, it's not just how you prepare for your promotion application, but how you are supervised towards that point. And I think that's a weak point still at Monash because it's very new.
Yes.
How is it that we train the supervisors of these people to make sure that they that they develop their career in this space? Because some heads of schools still don't understand very clearly what these education focused positions are, and they are not equipped to manage these people. I think that's a weak point. Now it will take time; it won't happen overnight. But having some sessions or things to train the supervisors, I think it would be very
Even if we
helpful.
don't call it a training session,
No,
we
it
could
could
have
be-
an event.
That's
You know,
right.
you
It could be like
celebrate
these
some
lunches.
profiles, you know what I mean?
Yes,
Like,
that's right.
I'm inclined to have, say, 6 education-focused staff who've been promoted or something, talking about the work they've done, and invite quite a few academic heads to hear, you know,
Right.
could do an event around it. Because if you say training, most
No,
people
no,
run the other way.
Won't work.
But if it's actually about sort of information about
Raising
the
awareness.
standards and so on, that's a good thing. And I think it's a bit like when we had our ethics policy, we had lunches, and
Yeah.
all the people came. And if you'd said training about it, they said, oh, I'm not sure. You know, it was really interesting, the psychology of it, yeah.
I think that's a good idea. I
Yeah.
think there's still a
Yeah.
lack of clarity around the expectations
Yes,
for the
yeah,
roles.
that's right.
And it's really hard when you're talking to staff to advise them
Mm.
about what to actually do.
I think that's
And
good.
I think the more examples we have of what people have done, that
Yep.
would really help us. Because there's many ways you can have an education
Oh,
focus
yes.
role, so
It's not just
we're
one.
all going to fit into the.
Bringing up that mind, one of the things I've noticed, too, just a quick comment, is that, because I sat on quite a few of these committees last time as well, is that we must retain the concept that this is not for people who have failed at research.
Yes, yes.
Okay? Because there is still a little bit, I mean, by the way, we've had promotion ever since Monash existed, and there's still confusion about the normal, traditional method after 50-something years. So don't expect it doesn't happen like that. But having said that, still some people think, oh, this is like for pre-retirement contracts only, or people who are weak, or something like that. You know, that's the default position that they come to the table with. And to tell them that, no, this is another career stream, which sits alongside, like research only is another one. You know, so we show the diagram, in fact we have a diagram, don't we? Which has research only here, and what I call balanced scorecard nominees there, education focused, and we're considering, probably won't do it I think, but we were considering a clinical stream as well, because that had been put forward by 1 or 2 faculties. But it's rather tricky because clinical is defined in so many different ways. But anyway, we were just looking at it, you know, as an option. So I guess what I'm saying is, it's not about failure, it's about success. That's the point I want to make, okay? So that we have to get through to every supervisor and every academic head.
And I think
Yeah.
keep reinforcing
Yeah.
that too.
That's right.
Because otherwise, if it's perceived like that, then it's not going to succeed.
Yeah, of
So
course.
you have to keep-
And the other part is the corollary is not everyone who asks to be translated into or asks to be promoted will succeed. Because if you have a benchmark of quality, it might be not yet, or you know, do some more work in this area, or you know what I'm saying? It can't be
Yes.
an automatic thing, or else then the quality isn't there either. That's the
Exactly,
trick,
yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that. Anybody else? Any other questions or comments?
Can I have a third one?
Yeah, go for it.
I don't know whether that was a need in other faculties as well, but in my own faculty there were 3 people who went for promotion, and they all had the same problem when they were working with the application. More than applications, this distribution of percentages. And the 10% for service was too low for some of them,
Oh, yeah.
because these were people who were coordinating huge classes, and a lot of their contribution to education really falls within service. So it was difficult to say, well, just put it into under education. That was my advice to them. But it's not clear, and they feel nervous about it.
That sounds to me like educational leadership though, so it does sort of fall in education as well. Because
Right.
we similarly, as much as we don't want people to be thought of as teaching only, we also don't want people that are just doing, you know, a range of administrative tasks.
Yeah, it's not
either.
service only.
Yeah, but that was my advice to them. But and they got promoted. That was great.
Yeah.
But yes, it's still a bit of a problem for
Yeah.
people who look at that form and they look at the guidelines and they say, well, why I'm doing much more than 10% in service. And sometimes service not just within the university but outside.
Yeah.
Right? It's not necessarily research, but it's service
Yeah.
through education in general.
So Christina's point's a good one. Sort of forgive me for, you may want to answer
No, no.
first, is that right? But look, the other thing to think about is this, that if you wanted to add up just percentile terms or percentage terms, a lot of people, if not the majority of staff, would have more than 100%. Okay? I mean, I know it sounds weird, but if you sort of went, what percentage of my time, if it was 37.5 hours a week, oh, you'd be way over. You know what I mean? And even in my own case at the moment, I might only have 7% research time because of the other things that I do, but we still keep it alive, you know? So what I'm saying is, people will probably inevitably have more than 10% service. It's how you allocate it, because we don't have a service-only appointment stream. That's the point to make. So it is a little, I say to people just in career advice, be a little careful about only doing those representational roles, because it is quality driven and it's harder to measure those sometimes. You know, that's the truth of the matter. It's not so much that people haven't, there's academic heads and there's fantastic academic heads, for example. So people, when it comes down to being a head of school, the committees will sit and say, but was that person responsible for transformation in the school, or something like that? Or was it just,
Doing the job.
Yeah, doing the job or keeping the seat warm, that kind of expression. So you see what I mean? It's all qualitative in that respect. So therefore it's both quantitative in terms of service, be a little careful, but if you move it into the education, make sure you can demonstrate the impact. That's the point.
I should point out that you can actually double your word limit when you're looking at the education component of your application form compared to other candidates. So, you have quite a bit of extra room to
And that was
say.
difficult too, because then what do you do with the other part? You
Yeah.
can't double this and then take away from that. That was difficult.
No, you can double it for education and then stick within the word limits for the other
Well, I
areas.
was told something different.
Oh.
So,
okay.
so anyway.
But don't feel you have to double it. This is one of my anti-drudgery jobs.
No.
Just because the limit is expanded doesn't mean you have to fill it, as long as the case is made, right?
I was, so maybe clarity around that too,
Yeah.
because I definitely was told, no, if you add to here, and because I thought this is not really fair for all the other candidates, if I can double this, yes, I was told, no, you have to then reduce the others. So, I mean,
Right.
anyway.
That is
Clarity
true,
around
I
that
agree
would be
with
good.
that is true.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And just clarifying, when it's learning and teaching research, they put that in the research section of the pro, don't they? Is that right?
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
We try not to be too
So
prescriptive
that
about
saves you a bit of space.
Yes.
Yes, but then it's very borderline often. It can go in, I had things that could go in 3 sections. So, it's
And
how
it's
you
all how you present it.
present the story, yes.
It's your opportunity to present your career and your achievements in however you want to within your boxes. But it's how you frame that case is very much an individual decision.
Yeah.
And how you assign your weightings, it may not be about your time allocation, but rather about your impact. So you might not do a great deal of teaching any longer, but be doing a lot of design work, and that still increases your education weighting.
I've told this story before, but I mean, sometimes it's good to give an instance of a real person, even if I don't name the person or the place. I might say the place, but it wasn't here. So I think you know this story because it was in a science context. But I'll tell you why education-focused roles are good. Because if you don't have them, this kind of thing happens. There was a person when I worked at QUT who applied for years to get promoted to level C from level B. Okay, was very strong educationally and had quite good research. But it wasn't so what you might describe as stellar. It was good, but not stellar. But, and then there was this third category of service, right? Which they had similar to, and never put anything in there. It was blank, right? So we come in, when I was on this committee with 90 applications from all over the university, we look and say, I just don't understand this. Education is so strong, like it was one of the top, sort of 1% of the whole university. Research was in the top 10%, but the service was nothing. So we kept trying to drag this information out of the person and said, are you sure you don't do anything outside the university that's relevant to what you do? And he said, no, nothing. I said, are you absolutely sure? We sort of asked in different ways. What do you spend your time doing on the weekends or something? Like, did we try to do without invading privacy? He asked the question. He said, well, I do spend a lot of time because I'm secretary of the International Physics Union. and I kind of dropped my pen on the floor and said, did you think it might have been relevant to mention that under service? He said, No, it's not something that I do as part of my job at the university. It's a separate, see what I mean? The service was thought to be committee work or
That's what I thought.
things like that within the university, you know, but this was so relevant to the discipline. And then I said, is there any evidence that you've made an impact or transformed someone's, you know, career? Oh yes, we've changed the way that we assess, you know, European physics grants and all this, you know, I suddenly saw this evidence promoted in 2 seconds. But so, you see what I mean? Sometimes just asking the right question gets the right response. So if we had had education-focused roles when I was there, this person would have got up anyway on the education and the research that was there. And we wouldn't have had to do this kind of job of, you know, pulling the tug-of-war rope. So I'm just saying, often it is, people are so, there's either two categories. People who tell you too much and make a lot out of a very little, like, you know, I had the local Rotary Club visited for 5 minutes and it's in there on the CV, you know, kind of thing. Or they've done hours and hours and hours of stuff and don't mention it when it's really, really important. So it's a matter of, I think, your performance development supervisor giving you advice like that, what to put in, what not to put in. But that's just an example of a real life story. That person's now quite happily a professor in another place. So, you know, it does work.
Okay, well, if we have no more questions, we do have some delicious snacks
Yeah.
and some tea and coffee, so we might break for a little while and then Sue will have a chat